Hello, my name's Mark Webster. This, of course, remains Mark Baxter.
I do.
Don't see that ever changing, really.
Why would you?
No, exactly. We're here now.
We're here.
Let's stick with it.
We might let us out one day.
And I mean, we're doing this a while now. It's a good few months. We might be up in a year. I don't know. I can't remember.
Who knows?
I'll tell you what, I know. How long? 200? How many years?
200 years.
200 years?
Today's victim is
Sorry about this.
Clark's shoes.
Which, of course, will resonate across so many different kind of types and cultures and generations.
Loads of different cultures.
I mean, not least of which, one of the ones that we don't have to deal with here is, God, they're boring.
Yeah, no.
But guess what? They're not.
No, sir. No. Let me take you back.
Would you please?
1825.
There you go.
200 years, everyone. 200 years. Street in Somerset. We got Cyrus and James Clark. So it's a proper family firm who run a tannery. They have a tannery, preparing leather and sheepskin for the trade.
Okay.
Shall we say? James realises he's got quite a lot of offcuts. I know what I'll do. I'll make a pair of slippers. He makes a pair of slippers out of the sheepskin offcuts, and they're off. They're off on the shoe journey. And but they're a Quaker family. It's quite interesting. They're actually a Quaker family. Peace and love, everyone, and equality to all men. And they're very, very active in the community. The community street, and they're still down there. They're actually still operating. So
street as a strange name for a town.
Yeah, but
okay, be granted. But that's where Clark's are based still to this day. Yeah,
and they got they're very active in the community. Back in the day, town halls, community centres, swimming pools, a lot of theatres. Really invested in the area.
Can I mention the elephant in the room / boot in the room?
Yes.
Because Clark's obviously done a load of stuff. We'll talk about it all now. But let's be brutally honest. This is the conversation, the shoe here,
Let me get round to it.
Oh, okay.
Right, so 1825, they're marching on. Over 22,000 different styles of footwear.
Right, that's what I'm saying to you. Okay, so we've got to narrow this down.
In that time, yes.
How do you do
we
that?
We haven't quite got a lot of time to do that, so my choice is going to be...
Greatest hits?
Yes. The desert boots, which is obviously a classic, an absolute classic.
Yes.
We're going desert boot, we're going wallaby.
But I think...
I'm going to come back to them, and we're going to do desert trek.
Right.
There's three big hitters there.
A triptych, as one might say.
A triptych.
Now... What's interesting about that is, as you say, and this is why Clark's is such an interesting name, because it does imply boring school shoes, but it also is at the cutting edge of loads of cultures. Probably starting with the desert boot.
Desert boot, yeah.
Now the desert boot is an interesting name because the desert boot phrase... Okay, so the bit I know is in 1949...
No, before that.
The crepe sole is introduced.
Before that.
At the Chicago World Fair. But the desert boot, as you say, exists before that, doesn't it?
Yeah, Nathan Clark, again, a relative of James and Cyrus, all down the generations. He is out in Cairo, and he notices army officers of the 8th Army getting shoes made in the local bazaars, which are lighter in weight than the standard issue army boot. And they have a lighter sole, they have a crepe sole. And
as you can imagine, in that environment, that would be nice.
Very warm, and so I got light, sort of, the hot sand and these boots that he sees, and he makes a note of it. And apparently they're based on a South African farmer's, like a bit like the old sort of chucker boot. Like the chucker boot.
Veldskoen.
That one.
Veldskoen.
That's the chap.
Quite literally translated as field shoes.
That's the one. But he then takes he works on the design. He brings the design back when he comes out of the army, 46, 47. But they're so busy in street in Somerset, he can't actually get the guy to start developing the idea. So it takes a little while. Around 1949, the crepe sole is they notice it at a trade fair. and they launched the shoe, the boot around
the
it.
crepe sole. I think it's the story, though, isn't it? Do you not
Well,
think? Because up to that point, this is kind of anybody's shoe. The chucker boot is a conversation at the same time, isn't it?
This is the winning formula.
Yeah.
2 pieces of leather. It's only 2 pieces of leather with 6 eyelets back in the day. There's now got 4 eyelets in this. Crepe sole stuck on the bottom. It's quite a simple construction, but obviously it's a classic shape. It's been going doing the rounds for many years, obviously, for the 40s and 50s. And I did read that actually it didn't get immediate pickup in the UK. It wasn't really that popular, but in the States and Australia, it did really well.
That's strange. That's a strange route for a shoe to work.
I think that explains we're going to come to the Jamaican interest in this as well. I think the people that are working in the States who are from Jamaica, working out there as itinerant workers, hotels, whatever, start bringing back the Clarks back to Jamaica, and it becomes a very big brand out there. We'll come to that again.
Now, but there is this world in which there is this crossover conversation about a chucker boot and a desert boot.
Yeah.
Now, a chucker boot, in my head, and it is variations on the theme. Okay, the word chucker comes from polo.
Yep.
So it's basically clearly a shoe that was worn when you're playing polo. If you play polo in them days, you're a posh bloke who's playing probably somewhere in the Empire somewhere and blah blah blah.
You're going to be an army officer.
But the chucker boot ultimately becomes a phrase which is used a lot more for the way that the teddy boy shoe ends up becoming.
Yeah.
But equally, it's not. I think the chucker boot formally, and listen, tell us if you think we're wrong.
They will.
Oh yeah, it's nuance. But it's patently obvious what everybody thinks the desert boot is.
Yeah.
Chucker boot becomes another conversation. Bit more leathery, certainly with the sole.
Yeah.
Let's stick with this. How does this work its way through culture?
I think this was a very relatively inexpensive bit of footwear back in the day.
That's a good point.
And it gets picked up by the beatniks in the States. Jack Kerouac, Neil Cassidy apparently loved a bit of that. It then crosses over to back. Then starts doing okay over in the UK. We're talking to the trad jazz scene. We're talking the beatniks, and then the modernists.
Oh, hello, welcome to you.
The modernists pick up on this, and this obviously when we were growing up, we saw this on a lot of the chaps in original photographs from the early mid '60s. They were wearing the sand-coloured classic desert boot, and we all basically that is the shoe of off duty. You know, you got your brogues and you got your loafers. Off duty, relaxed. The desert, and it had to be Clarks.
Here's why I think that point is important. That length.
Yeah.
Short trousers.
Short trousers all day long.
If the look then was long trousers, you don't see that.
No.
So all of a sudden, that shape is obvious to everybody because trousers are there.
And not
a little bit of sock and trousers are there.
Not only the short trousers, we also talk about turn-ups on the jeans. The turn-up.
In other words,
the fold back on the jeans.
So you're showing the top of that boot,
and also your colour of your sock. The colour of sock was also. It was a bit of a moment. It was a great.
Well, it's accident or design. Actually, no, it's not accident because what it is, it's people working their way through this and going, do you know what? You put that.
I don't think these things are worked out. These things are just organically just happen.
Yeah, but in the classic way that a street look works, that's how they. You know, it's why you can see the top of people's kids' pants for the last 2 generations. Because it was a thing that happened.
It's a thing,
and that was the thing that happened with those. Yeah. So in terms of the way that they then sat down, were they all powerful through that 60s?
Yeah, period? I mean they were. Omnipresent is a word I like to use. I mean, the modernists would have worn them, but also I seen hippies wearing them and just general layabouts wearing them. They were like just a comfortable everyday shoe, a boot shoe. If you, I mean, a boot really, but they were just everywhere. And I think that a lot of we aspired to get a Clarks. And you couldn't always get them. I don't know why that was. You couldn't always get a proper Clarks.
Really?
Yeah, there was a lot of imitators cheap imitators on the market.
I suppose it's easy to copy.
It's relatively easy to copy that. And but the one you always wanted was a Clarks.
Were they a little bit more expensive?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, and because the chaps of the day would have worn a Clarks.
Now that feeds nicely into something that happens in 1967.
Yeah.
But by the way, slow burner. I'm saying slow burner.
Massive.
Because the word they were called a wallaby.
Yeah.
There was always called a wallaby.
I did quite well in Australia. I didn't tie that together.
It's an Australian word.
Yeah, I didn't tie it into this week.
Was a small...
Again, I think it did better out there. Again, I think it's because
That's not small kangaroos. It's small...
it's a baby kangaroo, isn't it? A wallaby.
Joey.
Joey's upstairs.
So moving on. Okay, so the Attenborough brothers we aren't. Sir Dave.
Wildlife on Springwatch.
Yeah, exactly. So we pressed on from there.
Leaving Springwatch behind.
67, the wallaby comes along,
yes.
which I think is amazing because what they've done is basically a moccasin in the strictest sense because it becomes this kind of structured shoe.
Named after a German moccasin, actually, called the grasshopper.
There you go.
So you're right, you get the moccasin look. Again, I think it's a lightweight, comfortable, casual shoe.
But guess what happens in 67 where the Clark Desert Boot and the Wallaby are now available, and you mentioned the fact it's because it's kind of a standard. It's an old man's shoe in certain places.
Certainly.
It's big in Australia. It's big in America. Let's cut to Jamaica.
Yeah.
And suddenly shit gets real.
Well, yeah, because again, obviously I said earlier the Desert Boot is at Jamaica, but the Wallaby also gets out to, obviously via the States, gets imported to Jamaica, and they just love the rude boy culture and the dancehall culture. They love that look, the look of the Wallaby. But it was quite a slow burner, and it took a while to get going. I think over here, for me, the no trainer policy at nightclubs become a bit of a thing.
Totally.
So this is a shoe that would, it's
fits that world.
Still casual shoe, but you can wear it at nightclubs. Someone did say at the Hacienda it didn't last very long.
It's the least appropriate sole.
Quite rude. But the look,
because you basically it would stick to the filth on the floor.
It was a big look for it in the 80s and the 90s and the.
I remember distinctly, and they weren't Clarks, but they weren't Wallabies. But there was a shop in Tottenham Court, in Oxford Street, around about where the 100 Club is. And this is around that kind of time when House and Ashley House is having this moment. And they were selling the kind of shot colours ones, the pinks, the lemons, the fizz colours ones. They were a Spanish shoe, I think they were. But whatever they were absolute rip-off.
Yeah.
Of wallaby, because wallabies were natural colours, dung colours, suedes and browns.
They were, yeah.
But again, even in saying that though, at that stage, it's taking Jamaica by storm.
Yeah.
If you want to find out, Pop Card, one of the eyes, I'll just pick one tune out of the world. Unruly Clarks, great video in which he's got shoes lined up against the wall. Dillinger sung about them, Ichabod sung about them.
Well, there you go.
They're enormous. In 1972, Michael Manley, who basically had his hand held up by Bob Marley,
and
exactly to try and imply unity in the West Indies. 1972, he banned imports of shoes.
Did he?
I think there was a problem that he had with the fact that these shoes, these simple, conservative, old man-looking shoes, were becoming part of some conversation where they were attached to a different kind of culture.
Yeah, the rude boy loved them. They loved it, and they were the look that they all aspire to, and from there it transfers into the hip hop culture.
Totally,
where you can now demonstrate that situation.
Now,
if you may.
My good lady wife, who Mr. Baxter is good friends with,
the blessed Deb,
Mrs. Webster, Deborah. She's Deb. That's right. She owns these, and she's extraordinarily proud of these. And this obviously a contemporary take, but that's the joy of this conversation.
They never stop.
They don't mess with the Desert Boot so much, but the Wallaby has been messed with quite beautifully over the years. As you can see, it says in here, Clark's Originals, which is true. That's what they are. You get your tag. You don't take the tag off.
Not really. Like kickers used to do when you keep
the tag. But these are her Pride and Joy by the Wu-Tang Clan.
I mean, there you go.
I mean, if you need any sort of basically
that
thumbs
shows you
up,
how far they travelled, doesn't it?
that's what, and that's the point of it. Is you can see it on the label actually. I think the Wu-Tang logo, even cooler. But that's the point. It's one of those old man name labels that transferred itself back into American culture.
Yeah, and it kept going. Obviously, in the 80s, 90s, you got Richard Ashcroft for the Verve, Urban Hymns, the album. He's wearing a pair of wallabees on the cover. Again, that if you want to be an influencer, there you go. A lot of people would have worn them on the back of that.
I love the shape of the wallaby. I never owned a pair of desert boots. You're going to go for a third one.
Yeah, I'm going to throw in the Desert Trek, which is, again, it's a sort of a combination of that and that, really, and it's got a ridge down the middle. The reason why I'm throwing it in there, again, the Jamaican rude boy culture, they love the Desert Trek.
Really?
Because there's a young man on the tag, on the back of the thing, carrying a sack or a bag, and he was known as the bank robber. And the shoes become known as the bank robber. They become the.
Well, it's a bit like the brothel creeper in the sense of move silently.
That's probably Manly probably didn't fancy too much of that. It
all makes sense now, doesn't it?
It would all tie in one end, tie in the other, and it was and I loved that. I loved that the fact they had a nickname for it, and it was again a shoe that. To this day, they're still very popular, and the Wallaby and the Desert Trek and even the Desert Boot. They've done loads of collaborations recently with well-known pop stars and other brands, colours, leery colours. Not necessarily for everybody, but it just keeps moving forward.
And here's the exciting news. We've kind of touched on it in terms of English club culture, probably in the way that Jamaicans work is. You don't love a trainer. The trainer rules all. Guess what shoe might just have the opportunity to kind of transcend that and kind of break it down a bit.
If I had the choice.
And by the way, all three Clarks. Wow. Well played them.
I think they're a smart option, and it also. The trainer world is just it's just madness. It's just fun.
I know you know that, and I love the fact that
it's just madness.
I don't know if it still happens now, but there's a great story that when Jamaicans, West Indians started to arrive in the country through the 60s and 70s, and it was called the pilgrimage, and they would go and visit the street. So they go all the way down to, where is it?
Somerset.
They go to Somerset to pray at the altar of the Quaker Brothers Clark shoes. To go, this is where it all began.
Feed me.
200 glorious years ago.
What a great history.
What a wonderful thing. What a wonderful story to tell. More stories to tell just before we go. Before we get to the new bits, just need to say here, we hold here before your very eyes a brand new Clobbered shirt. It's the version, or it's the alternative version to Norm. So you got a Norm shirt, you got a Clobbered shirt, and associated merchandise.
We have various items.
Which is the word I just pretended was from the French, but it's not. Obviously, and subscribe. It costs you nothing.
Yeah.
I've got to do a new bit for you.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to as far back as 1939, or actually probably 2019. It's a company called Stanley Briggs, and they are based in Newark. Lovely little shop. And it's this. And what it is... You may recognise this from films that of the black and white era, starring Robert Donat.
Yes.
Robert Donat.
39 Steps.
Exactly. He's in all of those films.
Wonderful.
It's called the Birkin. Apparently Birkin is a word that you use for the way that a jumper is knitted. I won't go into any more detail.
Okay.
But it's one of them jumpers where there's a collar, but it's in the neck. And the reason, but this is a brand new version of it, and it's by a company called Stanley Briggs. And as I say, they've got a shop in Newark, but you can buy stuff online. I love their range anyway. 30s, 40s influenced, named after, God bless her, Stanley Briggs, who was born in London in 1919 and died at the Battle of Arnhem in 1944. And this is like a tribute name that she's using for a shop. And her name is Sophie Bainbridge, and she was a collector of clothes, became a designer of clothes, set up her own shop in 2019, and this is part of her range which absolutely reflects the 1930s and 40s.
Right.
They were little fellas in those days. So I don't know.
Smaller stature, weren't they?
I don't know if they're necessarily going to be stuff that.
The more upholstered types.
Thank you kindly, comfortably built gentlemen. But my word, it's a great look, and I love the Birkin jumper. Your one.
I'm going back to the very first programme. Clobbered Originals, Origin Story.
1987.
When I displayed a photograph of myself wearing what I called the Adidas Ringer T-shirt, this week I've noticed around my area adverts for the Adidas Originals, which are very, very similar in style. To the classic Ringer.
So the it's the crew neck T-shirt,
scoop neck,
blah blah blah,
free stripe, but in a very, very vibrant,
a ubiquitous look.
A great look, but it's, for the gals, very, very vibrant colours.
Wow.
Acid colours, pinks and greens and whatever. And the trefoil, which I didn't know till this week, that's the name of the almost like a flower design of the Adidas old-fashioned logo.
Say it again.
Trefoil.
Thank you.
I got it completely wrong.
No, I like it.
Designed in 1971 by Hans Flick, which I really like that name.
Yeah,
I really like that name.
Well, we've all done that.
We've all been there. So that's for the girls, and for the chaps, there's a little more linear design, which is Adidas written across in letters, written across the chest. But again, free stripe,
extraordinarily old
neck,
school,
very retro, old school, but tapping into the original style.
Love it.
Which just proves nothing really goes out of fashion.
As we just.
And before we go
on,
I did check on the website to find out more details. Bestseller in both men's and female. They gangbusters. It's the adverts in Everton Castle working.
Multi-generational.
Well, it just shows you.
And this is outside of South London.
If you show it to the youth will buy it.
They will have it. And we only talked about it 200 years ago, and also
last week,
tomorrow.
Today.
Yeah, there you go. And that's Clobbered.